After the death of Colonel William Sanders, Fort Loudon was immediately renamed in Sanders' memory. Just 10 days after Sanders' death, on November 9, 1863, the fort would be attacked by the Confederacy. There was a rumor that Lieutenant General Longstreet had heard while preparing for the battle that Grant had defeated Bragg near Chattanooga. McLaws wanted to once again delay the attack to ascertain the truth of the rumor. Longstreet refused, and this rumor made him more determined to take Knoxville back for the Confederate side of the Civil War. On paper, the Confederate Army had almost 8 times the men than the Union Army had guarding Fort Sanders. But would Longstreet's men be able to defeat the forces of Burnside? All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine for our flight back in time, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger vehicle to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. McLaw's plan. Longstreet had probed the defenses of Knoxville. It had been decided that the weakest point would be Fort Sanders. Longstreet had assembled a storming party that would attack during the overnight hours. Confederate Major General Lafayette McLaws asked for a delay in the attack so that he could move his skirmish line closer to the fort. The planned time of attack would be at dawn. McLaws divided his men into 2 columns and a 3rd unit behind them for a second wave of attack. On the left was Colonel Solon Z. Ruff's brigade, and on the right were units from Brigadier General Benjamin G. Humphreys and Brigadier General Good Bryan's brigades. And behind for the second wave was Brigadier General Archibald Gracie III and Colonel John S. Fulton's brigades. Brigadier General George T. Anderson's brigade from General Michael Jenkins' division was set to attack the Union trenches east of Fort Sanders at the same time. If McLaws was able to capture the fort, then he was to turn his men and attack South Bank defenses. In total, McLaws had 2,400 to 3,000 men at the ready to attack at dawn. The first and second obstacles. Shortly before dawn at 6:20 a.m., the 20-minute artillery bombardment was directed at Fort Sanders' interior. There was no reply from the Union artillery, as they were saving their ammunition for the oncoming attack. The 16th Georgia, 13th Mississippi, and 17th Mississippi charged the fort when the barrage had stopped. However, 3 obstacles would be in the way of victory for the Confederates. Planning is everything. We shall see how the brilliant defense planning of Captain Metcalf Poe would match up against the lack of foresight on the part of Lieutenant General James Longstreet. The first obstacle to happen was the weather turned. The temperatures had fallen, and besides the bitter cold, the freezing rain and snow were now falling from the sky, and the air was foggy. According to the plan, McLaws and his men approached to within 120 to 150 yards of the earthworks at 10 p.m. of November 28, 1863. The plan was to strike at dawn on the morning of November 29th at this location. However, while getting to this point had been successful, the movement of 2,400 to 3,000 men overnight did alert the Union Army that there was going to be an attack on the fort. The second obstacle that was before the Confederate men was the telegraph line that Captain Metcalf Poe had his men to string along the tree trunks at knee height. Many of the men that were of the first ranks were caught in the wiring and were picked off by the Union sharpshooters as they tried to untangle themselves, while other soldiers were able to get up again and surge forward toward the fort. The third obstacle. Fort Sanders was a prominent earthen constructed line that rose 70 feet or 21 meters above the surrounding area. Inside of this earthwork was 12 cannons and 440 men. Protecting the fort was a ditch that was 12 feet or 3.7 meters wide and 8 feet or 2.4 meters deep. There was a 70-degree angle vertical wall that rose above the ditch by 15 to 18 feet or 4.6 to 5.5 meters. And we will once again refer to this story as it is significant to the battle. At the time, Longstreet was watching the men around Fort Sanders with his binoculars when he noticed a soldier walking along a ditch line to his sentry post. The soldier made the ditch seem like it was only waist deep. Instead of sending a scout or a spy into the area to check out the ditch, Longstreet trusted what he saw and planned for the men to cross it by simply digging footholds instead of using ladders. What Longstreet did not know was that the ditch was significantly deeper and that the soldier had been walking on wooden planks. When McLaw's men finally reached this ditch, they found that the clay wall was frozen and slippery from the snow and cold weather, which almost made it unscalable. Even after being informed of this new development, the Confederate generals ordered their men to jump into the ditch and climb to the other side. The soldiers would climb on each other's shoulders to scale the wall, as digging footholds was impossible. Waiting for them were Union troops who rained musketry, canister, and artillery shells that were being used as hand grenades. Even though the men were being killed in large numbers, a few of the men did emerge from the ditch to make it to the fort after climbing over their fallen comrades. At the fort, the men were wounded, killed, or captured. Undaunted, there were 3 Confederate flags placed on top of the wall. Each of the color bearers was shot down as they planted their flags. The flags were from the 16th Georgia, 13th Mississippi, and the 17th Mississippi. Reinforcements? Knowing that the Confederate Army could eventually scale the wall, the Federal reserves came pouring into Fort Sanders. This doubled the men who were positioned there. One of the most significant among the Federal troops in this battle was Lieutenant Sam Benjamin. Benjamin had the idea to use improvised artillery shells as hand grenades, and he also, with the 20th Michigan Infantry Regiment, were able to break the Confederate morale by decimating the Confederates in the ditch. There simply was not enough of them coming over the wall to tilt the battle in the Confederates' favor. On the Confederate side of the fence, General Michael Jenkins' men failed to support McLaws. The fire coming from the 20th Michigan could have been diverted to the Confederates trying to gain entry into the fort through the northwest strong point. Jenkins failed at an attempt to break the Union lines through the attack on the east side of the fort. Johnson's troops started to fight 800 to 1,000 yards from the fort and was actually able to push the Union back to within 250 yards of the Union line. When McLaws apparently failed, so Johnson returned his men to the Confederate lines. A retreat. A huge wave of men began running back to the Confederate line. Informed of the obstacles that were insurmountable, Longstreet had a decision to make. Even though Johnson encouraged Longstreet to remain in the fight, Longstreet ordered a retreat back to the Confederate lines. The entire battle lasted just 40 minutes. McLaws ordered his men back 400 yards, then again ordered them back to the Confederate lines. Even though Longstreet would shoulder the blame for the loss of the men and the lack of planning, he would also blame McLaws for not carrying ladders to scale the wall. However, all of the Confederate leaders, including Longstreet, felt that such ladders were not needed to win the day when planning the battle. The Union defenders of Fort Sanders felt that this victory was revenge for the Battle of Fredericksburg. Burnside heaped praise upon Poe and Benjamin for their actions before and during the battle. A truce was brokered so that the dead and wounded could be removed from the field of battle. In total, the Union would have 13 casualties, 8 of whom were killed. The Confederates would lose a total of 818 men, 129 killed, 463 wounded, and 226 men captured. These numbers vary dependent upon the sources. The Battle of Fort Sanders would follow the reputations of Burnside and Longstreet for the rest of their lives. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian Civil War battles. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. Be sure to double check that you are subscribed, as some of our viewers are finding that they are no longer subscribed to our channel. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.